Okay, so we're here today with Jevin West. He's an associate professor in the Information School at the University of Washington and director of the new and very, very timely Center for an Informed Public. Jevin, thanks for talking to us today. You've just given a fantastic keynote here at HICSS in 2020. I wanted to talk to you about the rise of misinformation. You've talked about this becoming one of the biggest threats to democracy, to health, to well-being, and to global stability. Let's start easy. What is misinformation?
So misinformation in its simplest form is information that's wrong, that's sort of false. But within that misinformation Venn diagram, after I already made fun of those, you have disinformation, which has an intention, it's intended to be false. It's a different kind. But in academia, we like definitions, and we're sort of pushing and pulling on misinformation and disinformation and other information kinds of concepts. But I think the easiest way to think about it is it's information that's incorrect, but it can be incorrect because of an honest mistake. It could be incorrect because of something that got distorted in a game of telephone or something. That can happen. But the ones that we're worried about typically are the ones that are strategic misinformation. It's misinformation strategically placed to misinform you or to and some psychologists talk about, they have sort of fancy words, but it's basically to kind of trick you.
But one could argue that there's always been misinformation, and this
Yep.
has plagued the 80s and the 90s. But you see a particular rise in misinformation now, and you see this as the most important thing that we need to address. So you've built a whole center around this. Can you talk a little bit about why now? Why is this important now?
No, it's really important to be asking that question. I think why now partly has to do with the ease in which anyone in their pajamas can create information. It can spread at speeds we've never seen. It spreads at the speed of light. It's the virality of news is different than we've had before. It's always in our face. We're inundated with information, and the platforms are running these experiments all the time, millions and millions of experiments every day, tapping into these deep psychological triggers that even the best psychologists in the world don't have access to. So it's the ability to automate perceptions, really. If you give me 5 more minutes after this interview, we can go send out a whole bunch of bots, create a bunch of likes, and we can try and sort of push the needle one way or the other. There are companies that make money on this. People that are pushing propaganda themes have this ability. So it's this ability to scale information like we've never seen through automation, through the ease of creating information, through our consumption habits, and also just plain how easy it is to distort the information from the beginning, whether it's a deep fake or an image distortion, or having bots now create whatever words you want to. So it's a different time period. Now, we've always had misinformation. We've had yellow journalism. We've had propaganda. That's always been around. But it's now that I think we're dealing with it at a different scale. But I'm optimistic. I think we can do something about it. But we need to do it now.
So what can we do about it? How do we start?
Right. So I think there's kind of 3 areas that people point to. One, we can look again to technology and say, well, it got us in this mess. Can it help us get out of it a little bit, or at least slow its spread? I think there's some, optimism that AI could detect fake news, although I'm not super optimistic. Actually, I'll just take that back. I'm not very optimistic you can detect fake news, but I feel like you can create platforms that don't facilitate the kind of spread of misinformation that has been going on for the last 10 years. So there's technology, there's law, and people say, well, it's time for legal scholars to get involved and start coming up with ways to sort of deal with this mess. But the problem there, if you care, at least in the United States, we care a lot about the First Amendment, and that's degradation of that important freedom of speech right that we, at least I personally think, but even if you don't have a First Amendment in another country, I think we need to think about, creating laws, maybe to slow it, but not to get in the way of, a lot of the good things we get from that. So the third one I look at is just, education for the consumer. I mean, I think, you might not be able to tell the difference between that deep fake video or that deep fake image and that deep fake image. But what I want you to know is that the technology exists, and if it sounds too good to be true or too bad to be true, you can then start to corroborate, start to use some of these other tools to dig in. But knowing that it exists is one thing. The second thing is making sure that we're always creating these habits of mind. So when we see a graph or we see a news item or we see some clickbait sitting on our phone, that we're at least aware that it exists and we know people are selling us information. At least know that. We're going to we'll falter on that sometimes. I do too, but at least know it's there.
You and your colleague have actually created an entire class around this.
Yeah, yes.
Titled Calling Bullshit.
Yeah.
Can you talk to us a bit about that?
Yeah, so the class was a result of many of the things that we were seeing in our professional lives and our personal lives. We were seeing misinformation of a form in science, and of course we saw it in our professional lives. Every day we pick up our phone or open up our computer in the morning, you find it all the time, and it just seemed to be getting worse and worse. And I was starting to teach a class. I was studying developing curriculum in data science and machine learning at my university, and Carl and I have a lot of fun talking about our work, and I was telling him all the sort of things in data science, and he's like, we should do this a course on calling bullshit on all this stuff, because AI is one of these big hype areas, and there was lots of reasons to be excited, but lots of reasons to be a little skeptical of the big data revolution and AI. And so it started there, but then it sort of expanded because it just kept touching every aspect of society and every aspect of our lives. And we thought, there's no other course that we can teach that'll be more important than just helping people think better about data, about information, about journalism, about their digital environments than any of the other things they do in their other classes that they take of mine.
So spot it and call it out.
Spot it and call it. And that's a hard thing to do, and it's very tiring, so I don't expect people to do it, and I don't do it all the time, but it's just getting a little bit better all the time. It's like you just, maybe every week you call out one thing, and you do it in a civic way. You never go, never attack a person, attack the idea, and do it in a very civil manner, and know a lot of times it's probably an honest mistake that someone made, because we all make mistakes.
Jevin, thanks so much for talking to us today.
Yeah, thanks so much, and thanks for the interview, and thanks to all of you listening right now. Good luck in your conversation.